The Lorf are a humanoid race who live far away from the world of humans and spend their days weaving highball, which are warped threads that represent the flow of time. They age really slowly and can live for hundreds of years. They are peaceful people commonly referred to as the Clan of Partings. Makia is a young orphan who belongs to this clan. While returning from a wash, her best friend, Lilia, and friend, Krim, run off to meet their families, leaving Makia all alone to herself. Later in the day, the clan's chief Racine, to whom Makia is an assistant, finds Makia crying. When she wonders why, Makia tells her she feels alone. Touched by the girl's sadness, Racine wipes her tears away and asks if she knows why they're called the Clan of Partings. After Makia answers no, Racine informs her they're called so by humans who believe they're creatures from legends, as a result of living a long life with little changes in their appearance. She says 100 years ago, other creatures like them existed. A clan with wings like a bird's, flowers that sing before the break of dawn, and giant fishes in the waterways. However, they've all gone extinct, adding that the reason they continue to weave the hibial cloth is to serve as a reminder of these forgotten creatures and their own past. She says everyone they've lost keeps on existing through the hibial, and as a result, Makia shouldn't feel lonely whenever she weaves hibial. Finally, she warns Makia not to ever love anyone outside of Lorf, because only then will she know true loneliness. Considering they live for a really long time, it'll be a great sadness for her to watch someone she loves grow old and pass on. Later at night, while Makia weaves hibial, she ponders on Racine's words, depressed. Then while sitting at her window, she spots Krim sneaking out. Curious, she decides to trail him. As she watches Krim put a flower in Lilia's hair, she realizes they're secret lovers. Makia is drawn to tears. She doesn't know what being loved feels like. Just then, as Lilia and Krim play in the blooming flowers, Makia suddenly screams, drawing their attention to the invading soldiers on the dragons' backs. They're from the kingdom of Mazarut and their dragons are mostly referred to as Renato. When Krim directs Makia to find Chief Racine, she runs off, breathless. After finding Racine's home empty, Makia hurries to the hibial tower. While running about, Makia gets locked up from the outside. Meanwhile, the Lorf gather up in fear as Renato descends to the ground. When the leader of the soldiers, Chief Iser, demands to know who heads the village, Racine steps forward. After respectfully bowing, Iser says he heard Racine is a 400-year-old monster. Without affirming nor denying it, Racine tells him their daily lives consist of weaving clothes repeatedly without getting any rest, and as a result, they aren't interested in interacting with humans. Snobbish, Iser commands that the king wants her presence at the Mazarut royal palace. When a man Lorf stands in his way, Iser smacks him aside and orders that the women be taken away. As the women Lorf scamper to safety, one of the Renato yields to the red-eye disease and goes out of control. At the same time, Makia hopelessly bangs at the windows. As Renato crashes in, it goes into a frenzy and attempts to attack her, but she evades it. After getting tangled with the hibial, Makia clings to it, desperate for survival, as she's swept up and taken away. Midair, the Renato engulfs in flames and crash lands in a forest, deceased. Luckily, Makia is unhurt. As she checks her surroundings and realizes how far she is from home, Makia screams in horror. While wandering aimlessly through the forest, she stops at a cliff, tempted to jump off. However, something mysterious calls her attention. Makia walks past victims of a massacre, following the cries of a baby. She arrives at a tent. Without looking to the ground, she trips and falls, and picking herself up, she sees the body of a slain woman, cuddling a baby tight and shielding it from harm. Quickly, Makia backs away, afraid. A young man appears behind her, startling her. He happens to be a wine merchant, and guessing who she is, he asks if she's Makia from the elder's place. Noticing she's too afraid to answer, he tells her he came to buy hibial but got stuck there. He tells her there used to be a settlement for wanderers, however, it seemed they got attacked by bandits. As he watches the slain woman, impressed by her determination to keep her baby safe at the cost of her life, he calmly suggests to Makia that they leave the baby be so it can be reunited with its mother soon, rather than allowing it grow up to being all alone. Touched by the thought of leaving him alone, Makia curiously touches the baby and instinctively it holds her finger. Makia is fascinated. When she tries to pull the baby away, she discovers its mother's arms are stiffened. Carefully, she begins to pull at her fingers, until finally sets the baby free. Teasingly, the young merchant reminds her the baby is actually not a toy, to which she affirms, calling the baby her hibial. Then taking the baby away from the havoc, she wraps her shawl around him and kisses his head, taking him as her own. In the village of Helm lives Mido, a kind woman with 2 boys. When she hears her dog barking so loudly, seemingly at a stranger, she grabs a pitchfork and peeps into her shed, startling at the sight of Makia who's trying to feed the baby from a goat. Later, after Makia gets invited inside, Dayal and Lang wonder if Makia is the mother of the baby, but she shakes her head no. When the baby begins to cry, Mito attempts to carry him but Makia refuses protectively. Lang asks for the name of the baby. Makia, anxious to produce one, quickly names him Ariel. Mito brings Makia to Daryl, a cloth merchant, calling Makia a child of her relative who can weave clothes. Obliging, Daryl says there's an unused weaving machine at the back of the shop for Makia's use. Not long later, while Makia waits outside, Daryl admits knowing she's a Lorf and assumes Lorf clothes can fetch a high price. He promises not to disclose her identity, to which Mito expresses appreciation. While heading back home, Mito tells Makia that raising a baby alone is a lot of work for a mother. Gloomy, Makia confesses not knowing what having a mother feels like, since she never knew hers. Attempting to ease her mood, Mito playfully smacks her belly, relating the stress of it to motherhood. Humored by this, Makia begins to laugh. As time passes, Mito dyes Makia's hair to draw lesser attention to her, and Makia begins to get more acquainted with Mito's children, while observing Ariel's gradual growth. Meanwhile in Mazarut, Chief Iser tells the king that more Renato has contracted the red eye disease and have been euthanized and cremated to prevent further spread. Nonetheless, the number of their Renato continues to reduce, with only 5 left alive. The king is distressed to hear this. Further adding to his dilemma, a member of the council reminds him they've been able to control the neighboring countries only as a result of having these Renato. Nonetheless, once the Renato are all gone, these countries will fight back and their superiority will crumble. Another council member suggests they find a means to exist beyond human understanding. Excited by the prospect, the king says that has been acquired, calling it the blood of the chosen, a Lorf girl that has been prepared to be Prince Hazel's bride. On the other hand, Lilia, who's the blood of the chosen, condemns the sick Renato to eternal sleep as punishment for all the damages they made and the people eliminated. When Iser informs her that the king is demanding her presence, he curiously wonders why she spends time with Renato. Cheerless, Lilia tells him their abode looks like the Hibiel Tower in her home village. Makia teaches Ariel to weave Hibiel. When he shows her his work afterward, impressed with it, she tells him about where she was born, and how they made use of clothes rather than characters to express their feelings. Becoming moody, Ariel asks to know where he's from, but Makia distracts him and begins to tickle him. The next day, Ariel's friends tease him about having a strange mother. Upset, he runs home. Makia, on the other hand, receives Hibiel from Daryl, who claims it was brought in by someone. While reading through the message, Makia learns that Lilia is being forcefully married off to Prince Hazel. Shaken by the news, Makia falls to her knees. As they walk home later, Mito assures Makia that Daryl will let her ride off in the ship he uses for transporting his materials when she's ready to go. Then remembering Ariel, Mito wonders what will be done about him. With Makia too distressed to speak, Mito suggests letting him stay with her. Just then, Ariel emerges in the distance, shouting as he runs towards them. Subsequently that night, they all gather to bury Mito's dog after it passed on from an illness. With the kids heartbroken, Mito guarantees them that passing away is a natural occurrence that's bound to happen eventually. Makia, at the thought of losing Ariel, runs off, crying. Lang runs after her and comforts her, reminding her she's a mother and oughts to act like one. After getting a grip on herself, Makia returns home to find Ariel sleeping at the door. As she lifts him, she discovers he's gotten heavier than she remembers, apparently growing faster than she is. The next day, Ariel's friend, Dita, visits him to make an apology about the previous day, but when Dayal tells her Ariel is gone, her face drops, disappointed. Meanwhile, Lang refuses to see Makia off, afraid he won't be able to hold back his tears. On the ship, Ariel persists in going to the deck, but Makia chases after him hopelessly, urging him to return. Suddenly, she bumps into Krim and immediately embraces him, happy to finally see a familiar face after so long. Thereafter, Krim tells Makia that the king of Mazarut is after their blood. After arriving at Mazarut, Makia and Krim meet other Lorfians. During a meeting, Krim and the other men Lorf prepare a plan to attack the prince at a parade tomorrow that'll be held in honor of his wedding to Lilia. They intend to take Lilia after creating a diversion. Later, when Ariel asks to see the parade, Makia declines. Ariel, disappointed, hides his face under his blanket. Makia is racked with guilty. Determined to make up for it, she begins to tickle him. The next day at the parade, the king announces that the Lorf blood has now become a part of their royal family, while claiming they've been chosen by the gods to carry on with ancient legends and are therefore fearless to their enemies. He adds that a new legend will be born at Mazarut. In the course of the parade, Krim appears in the crowd and stabs a Renato, sending it into a frenzy, as it hurls Prince Hazel to the ground. In the course of the diversion, Makia sneaks up to Lilia and leads her away from the parade. Finally alone, Makia embraces Lilia, happy, but Lilia looks rather confused. When Makia tells her she came alongside Krim to rescue her, Lilia withdraws, ashamed, declining to go. Despairing, Makia persuades her, but Lilia doesn't yield. Finally, she leads Makia's hand to her belly, confessing she's pregnant for Prince Hazel and can no longer be with Krim. When the king's soldiers begin to run in their direction, Lilia directs Makia to leave. With Makia still reluctant, a stranger sweeps in and runs off with her. The stranger is the earlier wine merchant she met at the tent of Ariel's slain mother. The young merchant wonders if Ariel lived and assumes he should be about 6 if still alive, then finally unveiling himself, he reveals he's a half-Lorf, to Makia's amazement. He tells her both Racine and the elders banned Lorfians from leaving their village because they know the harsh treatments, ridicule, and hatred they'll suffer from humans, which is why they isolated themselves. Then as he leaves, he waves her goodbye. When Makia finds Krim solemn in the room, she offers to treat his wound, but he declines. Intending to drown the awkward silence, Makia tells him about Ariel, admitting she's sometimes confused if she sees herself as his mother or as an older sibling. Snobbish, Krim wonders why she took him, knowing he'll pass on long before them. He tells her she'll only feel loneliness afterward. Overhearing them, Ariel breaks into the room and tries to lunge at Krim, but Makia holds him back. The next morning, Makia reads Krim's message on Hibiel, where he informs her about his plans to stay in Mazerut with other Lorfians to continue in their rescue of Lilia, adding that she'll get in their way since she has a child to protect. As Makia and Ariel leave, she tells him they won't be going back to Mido but rather to a new place. Makia offers to work for a merchant but he turns down her offer. He thinks she ran off and doesn't want any trouble for himself. Frustrated and hurt, Ariel steps on his foot, but Makia grabs him and runs away. Makia asks Ariel to wait in the room of an inn while she goes out in search of a job. Finally getting one, Makia is told the job is a nightly duty. Reluctant, she says she has a son to look after, but the lady scoffs and angrily leaves. Tired and frustrated, Makia arrives at the inn. Seeing her Hibiel machine out of place, she vents her frustration at Ariel, who runs out of the room, hurt. Somber, Makia runs after him, but trips on the Hibiel machine and knocks her head against the door. Dropping to her knees, she weeps and recalls Racine's warning to her to never love a human or she be lonely forever. As she checks the Hibiel, she discovers a message from Ariel, which reads, "Mom." Remorseful, she goes out in the rain, calling to him. Finally finding him, she holds him tight, wishing he'd never have to grow up. However, Ariel refuses, telling her he needs to grow older so he can protect her. Years later, Makia works as a waitress in the city of Dorael. At the same time, Ariel has grown older and somewhat colder. As he walks into the restaurant with his friends, he ignores Makia. When his friends tease him that they look nothing like siblings, Ariel merely looks away. Just then, Makia serves their table. As Makia hurries to a new table, she comes across Lang, who's now a soldier in Mazart's army, and they're excited to see each other. Later, at Makia's home, while she has a conversation with Lang, Ariel abruptly leaves for night duty, ignoring Makia. In their awkward silence, Makia tells Lang that ever since they began to work, Ariel has become more distant from her. Though she blames herself, as a result of not being able to stay in a place for long. She tells him a few years ago he'd asked to sleep separately from her and stopped calling her mom. Meanwhile, more Renato pass away at Mazerut Palace and are ordered to be burned and buried. At the same time, Medmel, Lilia's daughter, takes tea at the palace. When Medmel asks for her mom, she becomes sullen, remembering she's not allowed to. In the meantime, the king is apprised that Medmel looks nothing like a Lorf, for she possesses hair, unlike the moon's color, with no golden ring in her eyes, nor a tendency for hypothermia, all attributes of a Lorf. As the king rants about his frustration, a council member tells him Lilia has been unable to take in another baby after Medmel and that Prince Hazel has grown tired of her. Angry, the king commands that they find another Lorf girl to replace Lilia. At the same time, Lilia is annoyed at being kept captive at the palace and begins to trash the place. When Chief Iser tries to calm her down, she asks to see Medmel, saying she hasn't seen her own child ever since she was born. With Iser looking vague, Lilia desperately asks for Makia instead, declaring she's tired of being so lonely. At the restaurant, Ariel's friends persuade him to take a drink, teasing him about becoming a man. Determined to prove himself to them, Ariel begins to drink. Later that night, Lang tells Makia that she's been sought for by the palace. Sensing the danger, Makia realizes she can no longer remain in town. Lang asks if she's willing to return with him to the farm, as he considers withdrawing from the army. When Makia refuses, Lang admits he's always wanted to be with her and wishes to protect her. Makia thinks about it for a moment, then turns him down, saying she only thinks about Ariel and it's all she wants. Taking a deep breath, Lang accepts, yet he offers to help her find a new place and a new work. Subsequently, on that night, Makia finds Ariel drunk. As he gets uncomfortably close to her, she shoves him to the ground. Sorry, she hurries to help him up but he shoves her aside. While staggering about, Ariel pulls down the hibio Makia had hung on the wall, and as he steps on it, Makia hurriedly pulls it from under his foot and clutches it in her bosom. Since Ariel made it while he was little, Makia had always held it dear to her. Frustrated that Makia keeps treating him like a child, Ariel attempts to take the hibio from her, but she doesn't let go. As he backs her into the wall, she smacks him across the face. Stumbling back, Ariel bumps into the table, sending the lamp swirling to the floor and igniting. Quickly, Ariel smothers the flame. After their tense confrontation, Makia informs Ariel they need to move somewhere else and wishes to know where he'll like them to go, but coldly he tells her he no longer sees her as his mother, and as a result, doesn't have to travel with her anymore. Heartbroken, Makia breaks down in tears. The next day, Ariel asks Lang to enroll him as a soldier at the castle. Hesitant, Lang says Makia won't be in support of it. Nonetheless, Ariel insists, declaring she's after all not his mother. Hearing this, Lang is upset and accuses Ariel of being an ungrateful child. Finally racked with guilt, Ariel admits feeling bad because he can't pay her back and protect her for all she's done, but he believes this is something that must be done. Makia helps Ariel pack up as he prepares to leave. After seeing him out, she bids him goodbye and hurries to the window to watch him run off. This may very well be the last time she gets to see him. While packing her own luggage, Makia weeps, heartbroken and betrayed. She's just watched Ariel, who promised to protect her, walk away forever. As she tries to console herself, a stranger sneaks in through the window, kicking down a flower pot. Makia startles, afraid. Later that evening, Lang appears to pick her up but her apartment is totally empty. Years later, Ariel is now in the Mazarut army as they hold a parade. However, this time, they move with a papier-mâché Renato, with almost all the real Renato deceased. Meanwhile, Lang has risen to the rank of division commander. He informs Ariel that a new Lorf girl has been taken, and she looks close to Lilia's age. He isn't sure whether or not she's Makia. Unbothered, Ariel announces he's going to be a father and arrogantly walks away after Lang calls him a brat. In the meantime, Makia, who has long been a captive of Krim, finally grows back her hair. Krim tells her it's finally time to be reunited with Lilia, having garnered support from Azart's rival nations, then he cuts off the dyed parts of her hair. Ariel arrives home to his wife, Dita, who was his childhood friend. As she serves dinner, a bell goes off at the Mazarut Palace. Dita and Ariel hurry to the window. At the Mazarut Palace, the combined forces shoot cannons at the palace. As Ariel runs off to join the war, Dita goes into labor. In the palace, the royal guards escort the king through a tunnel, abandoning Medmel and Lilia to the war. Krim and Makia ride through the forest. As they get closer to the palace, their horse is hit by a stray bullet and stumbles to the ground. Immediately, Krim is on his feet and running ahead. As Makia races breathlessly to the palace, she comes across Ariel. After a tense moment, a shot is fired at Ariel and Makia runs to safety. Finally, Krim finds Lilia and tells her he's come to take her home, promising they can now have the life they've always wanted. Lilia is in utter disbelief, as she's long expected he was gone. When she tells him she'd like to find her daughter first, Krim asks her to forget about Medmel. Refusing, she explains how she believed everyone she knew was passed away and thought solely about her daughter and how such thoughts pulled her through the years. Resigned, Krim decides they're better off gone and casts his torch to the ground, as he'd rather pass away with her if he can't have her. As he inches closer to her, he gets shot from behind by Chief Iser. Makia slips while running. When she gets up she feels a familiarity with the day she found Ariel as a baby. While wandering, she hears a lady's screams. Ariel, on the other hand, admits to Lang that he ran into Makia earlier and insists on going with him to find her. Meanwhile, Makia discovers Dita going into labor. Dita, recognizing her, tells her Ariel is her husband. The combined forces successfully invade the palace, hence, a battle ensues. At the same time, Makia tries to help Dita through her labor. Later, with the baby finally delivered, Makia recalls her first encounter with Ariel. After the battle, Makia finds Ariel wounded. They apparently lost. When Makia tells him Dita had a baby, Ariel springs up in surprise. After Makia successfully calms him, she explains how she found him in the arms of his late mother and took him in as her own. At the time, she'd expected they'd cry together, as she's always had a habit of crying, and as a result, had named him her Hibiel. However, it had been the opposite. She tells him when she's with him, all her sadness and pain goes away, and that while they were apart she lost sight of herself, except for when she thought about him. She wishes he'll call her by any name, even if it's not Mom, as he's helped her become who she is. When Lang emerges, Makia asks him to take Ariel to where Dita and his baby are. Then as she walks away, Ariel realizes just how important she's been and begins to call for her, but she doesn't listen. Desperate, he calls her mom, and she stops, only for a moment, to smile at him before going out of sight. While the combined forces celebrate their victory, Makia finds Krim sitting deceased in a tree. In the meantime, Lilia finally finds her daughter, who hardly recognizes her. When Medmel is introduced to Lilia, they're both drawn to tears. Lilia tells her she's a Lorphian who's a strong-willed woman and finally free. Just then, she runs off to the edge and jumps off, flying for a second before descending, to Medmel's horror. However, a Renato sweeps in just in time to rescue her, with Makia as its rider. While flying away, Lilia asks Medmel to forget about her and live her own kind of life, as she'll do the same and put away all the pain she suffered at the palace. Ariel returns home to Dita and his son. While he admires the baby, Dita apologizes for the naughty things she said to him about Makia while they were little. While consoling her, Ariel tells her he loves her, to which she admits the same. Many years later, after the fall of Mazarut, Makia visits Ariel and finds his granddaughter, Lily, and daughter, who tells her Dita passed away 3 years ago, although, prior to her passing, she spoke a lot about Makia. Leading Makia inside, she shows her Ariel, who's already old. Holding his frail hand, Makia realizes just how much time has gone by. Slightly, Ariel wakes up and bids her welcome, just before passing out again. Makia takes out an old cloth and lays it on him, knowing this will be the very last time she gets to see him. Later while leaving, Lily runs after her and gives her flowers before happily running away. As she stands there all alone, Makia recalls when she first held Ariel in her arms, how he'd clung to her and looked up to her with his beautiful eyes, and how she'd watched him grow and played with him, and then had watched him gradually change and become distant as he grew. She remembers him running to her while they lived at Mito's house and begins to sob uncontrollably. She'd always known this moment would come, but it still hurt very much. Makia returns to the young merchant from earlier. When he looks surprised that she's returned so soon, Makia tells him it doesn't matter, that Ariel will always live on in her heart through the Hibial. The merchant says this is why they're called the Clan of the Partings, because they get to part ways with everyone else while they remain alive. As they head on a new journey, Makia appreciates knowing Ariel and is happy to have loved him, with no feeling of regret, regardless of the pain that comes with the loss of losing him.